Her name is Rosie. 6 months old, barely a whisper of a human. All cheeks and hiccups and the occasional sound that almost passes for a laugh. She was asleep on my lap when I saw the text. "We're moving to Barcelona. All done here. Good luck, Eliza." I stared at it. Not because I couldn't understand it, but because I understood exactly what it meant. I unlocked the shared family account from my phone. Balance. 0 cent. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just stared at the screen as if it might change back. Like it would correct itself and say, "Just kidding. You're not actually alone. Not holding the baby your sister left here on a weekend trip that never ended." But it didn't change. They left, and they took every last cent with them. I looked down at Rosie, still sleeping with one pudgy hand gripping the fabric of my hoodie. Her breath was steady, her face peaceful. She didn't know that two people she never remembered had just detonated our lives with a one-line text and an empty bank account. And they said it like it was nothing, like I was nothing. My hands shook. Not because I was panicked, but because something heavier was settling into my ribs. Recognition. Of course they left me with her. Of course they drained the family fund we'd all contributed to. Of course they didn't say goodbye. My mom probably thought she was being practical. My dad probably told himself I was better at handling things anyway. That's always been my role. I'm Eliza, the stable daughter, the quiet one, the one who picks up after everyone else's emergencies like it's a full-time job. When my sister Mia went through her wellness retreat phase and disappeared into Arizona for 4 months, I covered her rent. When my mom got into essential oils and stopped answering her phone for a week, I found my dad's prescription refill. And when Rosie was born, I canceled my trip to Seattle and drove across state lines just to hold Mia's hand through contractions she didn't even remember. So no, I wasn't surprised. I laid Rosie gently in the bassinet beside the couch. Her cheeks were still flushed from sleep. She made a little grunt and rolled slightly onto her side, like none of this mattered. Like the people who made her hadn't just chosen sunshine and sangria over her. I walked into the kitchen. The fridge buzzed softly. Bottles, diapers, a half-used pack of wipes on the counter. Everything that used to belong to someone else was mine now, by default, not by choice. I opened the kitchen drawer where I kept important files, paper ones. The kind my mom always said were a waste of time. I pulled out our last shared bank statement. Just 2 weeks ago, it had over $19,000. That money was supposed to be for emergencies, for care, for Rosie. They took it all. I called them both, straight to voicemail. I texted Mia, "Where are you? Read." No reply. I could have screamed, but screaming would have woken the baby. Instead, I stood in the middle of my tiny kitchen with the paper still in my hand, and I laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. Out of the kind of betrayal that leaves you staring at your own reflection and wondering why you ever thought you mattered. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, about abandonment dressed up as logistics, about the fact that they didn't even leave a damn note for Rosie, not even a bottle warmer. I picked her up again. She was starting to fuss. I held her close and whispered, "I got you, okay? Even if no one else does." That night, I didn't sleep. Rosie wouldn't let me. Her schedule was chaos, a mashup of 40-minute naps and one long, piercing scream from 2 to 4 a.m. I fed her formula I barely had enough of. I bounced her until my back ached. I played lullabies from YouTube and rocked her while checking freelance edits on my laptop. The client asked why I missed a deadline. I told them it was a family emergency, which felt like saying the Titanic had a mild leak. By day 3, I stopped waiting for anyone to reach out. Friends sent me emojis, a meme or two. "Are you okay?" Text at 1:43 a.m. But no one showed up. No one except Rosie. Every hour, every cry, every tiny smile that made my chest clench. And I kept wondering, is this who I am now? The emergency plan? The last resort daughter turned sudden single guardian? I didn't even have a high chair, or childcare, or a single idea what I was doing. And they didn't care. They were in Spain now. probably drinking white wine on some rooftop patio with no idea Rosie was teething like a tiny banshee. And I was Googling how to unclog a baby's nose without making them scream. That night, as Rosie finally fell asleep against my chest, I thought about the last time my mom visited my apartment. She looked around and said, "Still no matching furniture? You're almost 30. She didn't notice the crown molding I installed myself, or the refinished floors I spent 2 weekends on. Just the mismatched coffee table and the fact I bought curtains secondhand. That was always her way. Find the one thing that didn't match and call it concern. But now I saw it clearly. They didn't leave because they were overwhelmed. They left because they could. And they knew I'd be the one to stay. The mail came late that Friday. Just bills and a coupon for free breadsticks. But tucked under the electric company envelope was a small glass container. Warm. On top, a note. "You're doing more than enough." I looked across the hallway. Mrs. Kaplan's curtains twitched. She was retired. Lived alone. We'd only spoken once before, something about the recycling schedule. Later that night, she knocked. Just once. No eye contact. She handed me a folded blanket. "It's not the right size," she said, and left. It was the first time someone had acknowledged I existed in days. That night, Rosie and I sat in the pale light of the kitchen. She was perched in her car seat while I spooned cold pasta into my mouth with one hand, the other holding her pacifier in place. My arms were jelly, my brain barely holding shape. But the silence didn't feel so sharp anymore. Saturday morning, I strapped Rosie to my chest and drove to my parents' house. I told myself it was for the formula, or maybe a change of clothes. But we both knew I was looking for something else. Their house still smelled like expensive candles and mild contempt. The kind of place where the vacuum lines in the carpet mattered more than who was crying in the other room. I moved through the kitchen slowly. The fridge was almost empty, just a few artisanal condiments and a bottle of white wine with a cracked label. The cabinets were wiped clean. The bed in the guest room had hospital corner sheets. Nothing was lived in. They weren't planning to come back. In the bottom drawer of the office desk, behind some expired coupons and a half-dead pen, I found it. A green folder labeled Spain. Inside, printed flight itineraries going back 6 months. A signed lease for an apartment in Barcelona. Activated international SIM cards. This wasn't sudden. It was planned. It was a clean break, months in the making. Behind the travel papers was something worse. A notarized form. My name, my address, my signature, copied from an old lease. It was legal guardianship of Rosie, granted to me indefinitely. No warning, no discussion, no signature from me. They didn't just leave me with their granddaughter. They made it legal behind my back. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees gave a little. Rosie stirred against my chest. In the back of the folder, a printed bank statement. The same family account. The one we all paid into. $21,400 withdrawn. Destination: Meridian Private Trust, Europe Division. They didn't just abandon us. They laundered the money overseas. I drove home in a haze. The air conditioner barely worked. Rosie fussed until I sang the one song I knew all the words to, Vienna by Billy Joel. She fell asleep before the second verse. That night, I sat on the floor and Googled how to file for emergency guardianship in the state of Virginia. On Monday morning, I walked into the legal aid office with Rosie in a wrap on my chest and a manila envelope full of every page I'd found. The receptionist didn't look up. But 20 minutes later, a man walked in, sleeves rolled, tie askew, coffee stain on his left cuff. He introduced himself. "Ethan Morris. Let's fix this." I nearly cried. He read through the folder carefully. Then again, he tapped the pages once and said, "They forged your consent, and they moved shared funds internationally. That's financial abandonment at best, fraud at worst." He asked if I had proof I didn't agree to guardianship. I told him I had texts, screenshots, Mia's message asking me to watch Rosie for the weekend. I had the receipt from the money transfer. I had the fake signature. "We have a case," he said. That afternoon, I printed everything, sorted it, labeled the tabs. Mia, texts, mom, transfers, legal signatures, baby, expenses. It felt like I was building a fortress, one document at a time. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mia. I let it buzz twice before picking up. Eliza, she said. Her voice was scratchy and smug. You agreed to this. No, I said. I agreed to help for the weekend. Not raise your child. Oh my God, she scoffed. You always make things dramatic. There was silence on the line. Then she added, they're done with you. You know that, right? They're not coming back to rescue you. I never needed rescue, I said. But Rosie does. Mia sighed. You're not going to win this. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch until she hung up. Then I saved the call recording in 3 separate folders. I named it Mia Denial.wav. That night, Rosie had a low fever. I held her against my chest as I watched the shadows move across my ceiling. I wasn't brave. I wasn't strong. But I wasn't scared of them anymore. The next morning, a message buzzed onto my phone. From my mother. We're flying back. We want to talk. We'll be at your place Thursday. No apology. No explanation. Just an announcement. Like I was their assistant. Like I kept something warm on the stove for them. 3 days later, they arrived. The first time I broke down, really broke down, it wasn't over the baby. It was over a coffee cup. I was washing the dishes after a long day. Emery had screamed for 2 hours, refused to nap, and then pooped through her onesie while I was on a Zoom call. I hadn't showered. I hadn't eaten. I was standing in my own kitchen in stained leggings, holding a chipped mug my dad always used, and my hands just started shaking. Then I dropped the cup. It shattered. And I collapsed right there on the floor with it, crying. No, sobbing. I didn't even notice when Emery's wailing started again from the nursery. I just curled in on myself and thought, they left. They really left me. The thing is, I hadn't even liked kids. I wasn't maternal. I didn't babysit growing up. I was the cool aunt, the one who brought noise, making toys, and left early. But now, I was burping her at 2 a.m., Googling what different baby cries meant. And sometimes, I hated myself for this. I would look at Emery and wonder, do you even know they're not coming back? I called my sister once. Not because I wanted to talk to her, but because I needed answers. Or closure. Or maybe just someone else to feel guilty. It rang. And rang. Voicemail. I didn't leave one. Instead, I wrote an email to my parents. A long one. I told them everything. How Emery had a rash I couldn't identify and I had no insurance. How I'd lost 2 freelance clients already because I couldn't meet deadlines. How I was falling behind on rent. But mostly, I asked, why? Why me? Why did you leave her? With me? No reply. Weeks blurred. Summer turned into early fall. My neighbor, Miss Daphne, an old widow in her 70s, started knocking on my door every now and then with a casserole or box of diapers. She'd heard the baby crying one night and offered help. She reminds me of my granddaughter, she'd say. You're doing your best, honey. That woman saved me, in small, quiet ways. One evening, she offered to watch Emery so I could go for a walk. Just 30 minutes. I hadn't stepped outside without a stroller in months. That's when I got the email. From my mom. Subject line, we're coming back. No explanation, no apology. Just a flight itinerary and the line. We'll arrive Friday. Can't wait to see you girls. Girls. Like we were having a tea party. Like they hadn't vanished across the world and left a 6-month-old behind like forgotten luggage. I stood in the park, heart racing. Emery wasn't even a year old. They'd missed her first real smile. Her first tooth. The first time she reached for me instead of her bottle. And now, they wanted back in? They landed in New York 3 days later. I didn't go to the airport. I didn't clean the apartment. I didn't even tell them what building I was in. They showed up anyway. I was on the couch, Emery asleep on my chest, when I heard a knock. My father's voice, muffled but unmistakable. It's us, sweetie. I opened the door. They looked exactly the same. Tan, relaxed. My mom was wearing some flowy white linen thing, like she was still sipping sangria at a beach cafe. My dad had new glasses. They were smiling. Smiling. Like this was a reunion, not a reckoning. Oh my God, my mom whispered when she saw Emery. She's gotten so big. She reached forward instinctively, arms out. I stepped back. Don't. Her face froze. My dad cleared his throat. Look, we know this was sudden. Sudden? You left me a voicemail. You left your granddaughter. There was a long silence. My mom looked down. My dad ran a hand through his thinning hair. Finally, she said, we thought it would be best. You were home. Your work was remote. Jessica needed space. We all did. Jessica. Her name felt like poison in my mouth. She left. I spat. And you enabled her. You made me Emery's mother without asking. She's your niece, my dad offered weakly. She's not a houseplant. She's a human being. They stayed at a hotel that night. The next morning, they called. Let's meet for brunch, my mom suggested, chipper. We can talk this out. We sat at some overpriced place near the Riverwalk. Emery was fussy. I hadn't slept. My mom sipped her latte. We were thinking, just until Jessica gets settled again, maybe you can keep her. A few more months. I blinked. Excuse me? She just got a job in LA. Big opportunity. Once she's stable, we'll revisit things. I stared at them, both of them, trying to figure out where the real people had gone. Because these were strangers. You think this is temporary? Sweetheart, my dad said gently, you love her. That's clear. We see how well you've handled this. Handled this. As if I hadn't cried into laundry piles and eaten saltines for dinner. As if I hadn't given up every part of my old life. I looked down at Emery, her tiny fists grasping at my sleeve, her round, trusting eyes. And I realized something. She didn't know them. She knew me. Her aunt, her accidental mother, the one who stayed. I stood up. I'm not your free babysitter. I'm not a backup plan. And I'm not giving her back so Jessica can play house whenever she feels ready. They were silent. I'm keeping her. You left her. I didn't. My mother looked stricken. My father looked angry. You can't just decide that, he said. You're not her parent. I pulled out a folder from my bag and placed it on the table. Inside was a notarized temporary guardianship form Jessica had sent me from Spain when she left. She made me her legal guardian. You think I was stupid enough to take her in without something on paper? Their jaws dropped. I leaned down, kissed Emery's forehead, and whispered, I've got you. And then I walked away. When the front door opened that Monday morning, I was feeding Jonah oatmeal and humming softly to keep him calm. He always got fussy if I rushed him, and I never did. But this time, I froze. Surprise, my mom said, wheeling in a designer suitcase. Behind her, my dad followed, tanned, beaming, holding some monstrosity of a modern art sculpture like it was a gift. Where's our little angel? She said, already scanning the living room. I didn't say anything. She walked straight to Jonah, pinched his cheeks like she hadn't ghosted him for months, and said, Mommy's back, baby boy. That did it. I stood up slowly. You're not his mother, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, blinked. Oh, honey, I meant. No, you don't get to waltz in here like you didn't leave me with your daughter's baby for 5 months. No calls. No help. Just emails about Catalan sunsets and seafood. My dad stepped forward. We thought it was good for you. You needed to grow up. I laughed, sharp and dry. No, you needed to run away from your own mess. And I was just convenient. Mom sighed like I was being dramatic. Elena, we trusted you. That should count for something. I picked up Jonah, who looked at me like I was his whole world, because I was. You didn't trust me. You used me. They exchanged a look. Then my dad smiled. Well, we're back now. We can take it from here. I took a step back, tightening my hold on Jonah. I don't think so. The first lawyer I saw told me I had no chance. I wasn't the mother. I wasn't a legal guardian. I had no claim. The second one paused, flipped through the daycare receipts, pediatrician forms, immunization records, all signed by me, and said, they abandoned him. You've got a shot. It wasn't about winning. It was about protecting Jonah from being raised by people who treated him like a burden they could pass off. Court was brutal. My parents showed up polished and smirking. My mom wore pearls. My dad called Jonah, our grandbaby, like he hadn't deleted him from their itinerary for half a year. They claimed I was unstable, that I was too attached, that I forged signatures and took advantage of a grieving family. But I had Mrs. Winston from daycare, Dr. Ho from the clinic, my boss from the library who gave a written affidavit about how I worked nights just to make ends meet and never once complained. The judge took it all in. And then she said something I'll never forget. Biology makes you a parent. Commitment makes you a caregiver. But love, consistent, selfless love, that makes you family. I didn't get full custody, but I got something. Jonah stayed with me. My parents got limited visitation, supervised. Every other weekend, if they showed up. Sometimes they didn't. I never forced it. Jonah grew. He took his first steps between my legs in our tiny hallway, his hands grabbing fistfuls of my jeans while he giggled. He called me Nene before he said Mama. Some days that broke me. Some days it healed me. By the time he was 3, we were our own little team. I still worked at the library, but I started writing too. Articles, essays, eventually a memoir about invisible motherhood. About being 23 and raising a child who wasn't mine, and yet was completely. A publisher reached out after a piece went viral. Jonah sat on my lap during the Zoom call. The agent asked, "Is that your son?" And I said, "Yes, he is." Last month, I got a letter. It was a short, formal note from my sister. She's in rehab. Again. She said she was sorry, that she hadn't forgotten me, that she knew I hated her, but she wanted to thank me for keeping Jonah safe, for being better than she could be. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I will. Because part of growing up is understanding that people are broken. And some of them break you in the process of trying to fix themselves. But that doesn't mean you stay broken. Yesterday, Jonah had a fever. Nothing major, just a cold. But he curled into me and asked, "Will you stay with me, Nene?" And I thought about Barcelona, about the passport stamps and the dinner cruises my parents flaunted while I was juggling teething rings and overdue bills. I stroked his hair and said, "Always." He smiled, then whispered, "You smell like apples." I kissed his forehead, because that's what mothers do. Even when they're not supposed to be. Even when no one gave them permission. Even when the world tries to tell them they don't count. They stay.